2026 will not be different because time passes. It will be different only if you do. Most people want a better year. Few people are willing to become a better person, and that's the difference. Let me tell you something most people won't admit. Your life is not stuck. Your habits are. Your 2026 is not waiting on luck, government, family, money, or opportunity. Your 2026 is waiting on you, not next year, not next month, in the next 30 days. Because transformation doesn't require a lifetime. It requires a decision, followed by discipline. See, circumstances don't change lives. Decisions do. The moment you decide, everything starts rearranging itself. But most people keep negotiating with their future instead of commanding it. For the next 30 days, you must do something radical. Stop asking, how do I feel? And start asking, what does the person I'm becoming do? Because identity drives behavior. If you act like who you want to become for 30 days, your brain stops arguing and starts aligning. Discipline isn't punishment. Discipline is self-respect in action. People say they want freedom, but they avoid discipline, not realizing discipline is the price of freedom. You don't need motivation. Motivation is unreliable. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. When you move, energy shows up. When you hesitate, doubt multiplies. For the next 30 days, guard your inputs like your future depends on it. Because it does. What you listen to, what you watch, who you talk to, what you tolerate. Your mind is a factory, and every input is producing a product called results. If you want different results in 2026, you must feed your mind differently now. And let's talk about environment, because willpower is overrated. If your environment stays the same, your growth will stay optional. Change your environment and progress becomes inevitable. Spend 30 days around people who speak possibility instead of limitation. Spend 30 days doing hard things daily, even when nobody is watching. Spend 30 days keeping promises to yourself, because confidence doesn't come from affirmations, it comes from proof. And when you stack proof for 30 days, you don't just change your habits, you change your self-image. And once your self-image changes, your standards rise, your tolerance drops, your future accelerates. By the time 2026 arrives, you won't be hoping it's better. You'll already be living proof that it is. So don't wait for January. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Start the 30 days because the next version of you is already available, but only to those willing to act. Most people are waiting for circumstances to change before they change, not realizing that circumstances are waiting on their decision. They say, when things get better, I'll do better. But life doesn't work that way. Progress doesn't begin with improvement, it begins with commitment. Your environment may be uncomfortable, unfair, or uncertain, but none of that has the authority to decide your future unless you give it permission. The truth is, circumstances are loud, but they are not powerful. Decisions are quiet, but they are absolute. The moment you decide, something shifts internally before anything changes externally. That internal shift is what eventually forces the external world to rearrange itself. Circumstances are temporary conditions, but decisions are permanent directions. When you let circumstances lead, your life becomes reactive. You move only when pushed, you act only when pressured, and you quit when resistance shows up. But when you decide, you stop negotiating with reality and start commanding your actions. A decision is not an emotion, and it's not a preference. A decision is a line drawn in the sand that says, no matter what I feel, no matter what I face, this is the direction I'm going. Feelings fluctuate, motivation fades, circumstances change daily, but a real decision outlives all of them. Most people confuse desire with decision. Desire says, I want this if it's convenient. Decision says, I'm doing this even when it's costly. Desire waits for clarity. Decision creates clarity. Desire asks, what if it doesn't work? Decision asks, what must I do to make it work? That's why two people can face the same obstacles and end up in completely different places. It's not intelligence, luck, or talent separating them. It's who decided and who delayed. The reason decisions are so powerful is because they simplify life. Once you decide, you eliminate options. You stop wasting energy debating, doubting, and second-guessing. Your mind stops asking, should I? and starts asking, how do I? That shift alone multiplies your speed and focus. Indecision drains energy. Decision concentrates it. And concentrated energy always produces movement. Every breakthrough you admire started as a decision made in the presence of uncertainty. Nobody ever had all the information, all the resources, or all the confidence before deciding. They decided first, then grew into the decision. Waiting for perfect conditions is just fear wearing the disguise of logic. Growth requires courage, not certainty. When you decide, you give your brain a clear instruction, and your behavior begins to align with that instruction over time. Your circumstances might explain where you are, but they do not justify where you stay. You cannot control everything that happens to you, but you are fully responsible for how you respond to it. Responsibility is not blame, it's power. The moment you take responsibility, you take back control. And control is what allows transformation to begin. When you decide, you stop asking life for permission. You stop waiting for validation. You stop outsourcing your confidence to outcomes. You act because you decided, not because it's easy, popular, or guaranteed. That's how leaders are formed. That's how momentum is built. That's how futures are changed. Your life will never rise above the level of the decisions you are willing to make under pressure. If you want a different result, you don't need new circumstances. You need a higher standard for your decisions. Decide before the evidence shows up. Decide before you feel ready. Decide before the fear goes away. Because once you decide, circumstances don't disappear, but they lose their control. And when circumstances lose control, your future gains direction. Most people try to change their lives by changing their goals. But lasting change never starts with goals. It starts with identity. You will never consistently do what contradicts who you believe you are. Behavior follows belief, and belief is shaped by repeated action. That's why a 30-day window is so powerful. 30 days is long enough to interrupt old patterns and short enough to silence the excuse of someday. In 30 days, you may not change everything around you, but you can absolutely change the way you see yourself. And once your self-image shifts, your actions naturally follow. Your identity is not who you wish you were. It's who you repeatedly prove yourself to be. Every small action you take casts a vote for the person you are becoming. Skip the habit today, and you reinforce the old identity. Show up today, and you reinforce a new one. Over time, the brain stops questioning the pattern and accepts it as truth. This is how transformation becomes automatic, not through massive, dramatic moments, but through quiet, daily consistency that tells your mind, this is who I am now. The reason most people fail is not lack of information, but lack of alignment. They attempt to live at a level their identity hasn't caught up to yet. They want disciplined results while still seeing themselves as undisciplined people. They want confidence while secretly identifying as someone who hesitates. But when you commit to 30 days of aligned action, you give your brain evidence. Evidence replaces doubt. Proof replaces hope. And confidence becomes a byproduct instead of a performance. For the first few days, your identity will resist you. It will feel unnatural. Your mind will argue. That's normal. You're challenging a story that has been reinforced for years. But consistency weakens resistance. By the second week, resistance turns into routine. By the third week, routine turns into expectation. And by the fourth week, expectation turns into identity. At that point, not doing the habit feels stranger than doing it. That's when real change begins to lock in. 30 days of showing up on time can turn you into a punctual person. 30 days of keeping promises to yourself can turn you into a person of integrity. 30 days of disciplined focus can turn you into someone who trusts their own execution. These are not motivational ideas, they are neurological realities. The brain is constantly updating its self-concept based on behavior. When behavior changes consistently, identity follows automatically. An identity shift also raises your standards. Once you see yourself differently, you stop tolerating what no longer matches you. You don't need external accountability when internal alignment is present. You don't have to force discipline when discipline becomes self-respect. This is why people who truly change don't talk about it constantly. They simply live differently. The power of a 30-day identity shift is that it compounds. When you see yourself as someone who finishes what they start, you approach challenges differently. When you see yourself as someone who does hard things daily, obstacles lose their intimidation. When you see yourself as someone who follows through, momentum becomes natural. You stop negotiating with your future and start acting in alignment with it. You don't need to wait for a new year, a new title, or a new situation to become a new version of yourself. Identity is built from action, not permission. Commit to the process for 30 days. Do the work even when it feels small, especially when it feels small. Because those small, repeated actions are not just changing your habits, they are rewriting who you believe you are. And once that belief changes, your life has no choice but to follow. Most people think discipline is restriction, but in reality, discipline is liberation. What feels like limitation in the moment becomes freedom over time. The absence of discipline may feel comfortable today, but it always produces captivity tomorrow. When you avoid discipline, you don't avoid effort, you simply postpone it, and the price increases with interest. Discipline is not about control imposed from the outside. It is self-direction chosen from the inside. And self-direction is the foundation of every form of freedom worth having. Freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. It is the ability to do what you should without being controlled by impulse, emotion, or circumstance. The person with the most options is not the one with the least structure, but the one who has mastered themselves. Discipline is how you reclaim authority over your time, your energy, and your focus. Without it, life decides for you. With it, you decide first, and life adjusts accordingly. Every area of life obeys this principle. Financial discipline creates financial freedom. Physical discipline creates bodily freedom. Mental discipline creates emotional freedom. Time discipline creates lifestyle freedom. There is no exception. You don't wake up one day free. You earn freedom through consistent, intentional discipline over time. The pain of discipline is always lighter than the pain of regret because discipline builds while regret only reminds. The reason discipline feels hard at first is because it exposes where we've been undisciplined. Resistance is simply the friction between who you are now and who you are becoming. If it feels uncomfortable, it's working. Discipline stretches your capacity before it expands your results. Most people quit at the stretching phase because they mistake discomfort for failure. In reality, discomfort is the signal of growth. Discipline simplifies your life. It removes decision fatigue by pre-deciding your actions. When you are disciplined, you don't waste energy negotiating with yourself every day. You've all read why decided what you do and what you don't do. That clarity frees up mental space, emotional stability, and creative power. Undisciplined people are tired not because they work too hard, but because they spend all day making unnecessary decisions and recovering from poor ones. Short-term discipline creates long-term dominance. While others are distracted, disciplined individuals are building. While others are consuming, disciplined individuals are producing. While others are reacting, disciplined individuals are executing. Over time, the gap widens so much that what once required effort begins to look effortless. That's not talent. It's accumulated discipline, expressing itself as ease. Discipline also builds trust with yourself. Every time you do what you said you would do, you deposit into your self-respect account. Confidence is not a personality trait. It's the result of keeping promises to yourself. When you know you can rely on your own word, fear loses leverage over you. You stop needing external validation because internal integrity becomes your anchor. True freedom is the ability to choose your future instead of being dragged into it. Discipline gives you that power. It allows you to say no to what doesn't serve you so you can say yes to what does. It allows you to endure temporary discomfort so you can enjoy permanent advantage. The disciplined life is not smaller. It's more expansive. It creates options, leverage, and peace. In the end, discipline is not something you do to punish yourself. It is something you practice to protect your potential. Every disciplined action is a vote for the life you want to live. Over time, those votes accumulate into habits. Habits form systems, and systems create freedom. That is why discipline is not the enemy of freedom, it is its source. Everything in your life is producing a result, and every result can be traced back to a input. Nothing appears randomly. Outcomes are not accidents, they are responses. Your thoughts, your habits, your confidence, your income, and even your emotional state are outputs generated by what you consistently allow into your mind and environment. Most people focus on changing results while ignoring the inputs that create them. That approach guarantees frustration. If you want a different output, you must intentionally change what you are feeding yourself every day. Your mind is not passive. It is constantly processing, filtering, and organizing information into beliefs. Whatever you repeatedly consume becomes familiar, and whatever becomes familiar eventually feels normal. That's how limitations form. When you consistently listen to doubt, fear, negativity, or distraction, your brain accepts those signals as truth and adjusts your behavior accordingly. You may not consciously agree with what you consume, but repetition makes agreement unnecessary. Exposure alone is enough to shape perspective. Inputs don't just inform you, they condition you. The conversations you engage in, the content you scroll through, the voices you listen to, and the environments you tolerate all leave an imprint. Over time, those imprints influence what you expect from life and what you believe is possible for you. Low-quality inputs produce low expectation outputs. High-quality inputs raise your internal standards before they ever change your external circumstances. Most people underestimate how much mental clutter they carry. Constant noise trains the mind to stay scattered. Endless consumption without intention weakens focus and patience. When your inputs are chaotic, your outputs become inconsistent. You start projects but don't finish them. You feel busy but not productive. You move a lot but progress little. This is not a discipline problem, it's an input problem. Focus improv. Ace, naturally, when the mind is fed with clarity instead of clutter. What you feed your mind daily becomes your internal dialogue. If your inputs are reactive, your thinking becomes reactive. If your inputs are intentional, your thinking becomes strategic. Over time, this shapes your identity. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your conditioning. Conditioning is built almost entirely through repeated inputs. Changing your inputs is one of the fastest ways to change your trajectory. When you replace passive consumption with purposeful learning, confusion turns into confidence. When you replace negative environments with growth-oriented ones, hesitation turns into action. When you replace distracting inputs with focused ones, momentum becomes inevitable. You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. You need to control what you allow in consistently. Your environment is an external input, and it speaks even when nothing is said. The standards around you influence your standards within you. When excellence becomes normal in your environment, mediocrity becomes uncomfortable. When growth is expected, stagnation feels out of place. That discomfort is not pressure, it's alignment pulling you forward. Every high-performing individual is extremely selective about their inputs, not because they are disciplined for discipline's sake, but because they understand leverage. Inputs are leverage. A small change in what you consume daily can produce a massive change in how you think, act, and decide over time. This is why guarding your mind is not optional. It is strategic. If you want your future to produce something different, start by auditing your inputs. What are you listening to first thing in the morning? Who has access to your attention? What ideas are shaping your expectations? You don't need more willpower, you need better inputs. Because once the inputs change, the outputs have no choice but to follow. Most people are waiting to feel motivated before they move, not realizing that motivation is one of the least reliable forces in human behavior. Motivation is emotional. It rises and falls based on mood, comfort, confidence, and circumstance. Action, on the other hand, is mechanical. It does not require inspiration. It only requires a decision to move. This is why action always beats motivation. People who wait for motivation stay stuck. People who act create momentum, and momentum produces motivation as a side effect. Motivation feels powerful, but it is inconsistent. It shows up when things are easy and disappears when resistance appears. Action doesn't negotiate with resistance, it works through it. The moment you take action, your brain receives a signal that progress is happening. That signal reduces fear, increases clarity, and activates focus. You don't need to see the entire path to take the first step. The first step creates visibility for the next one. Action changes your internal state faster than thinking ever will. When you act, your posture changes. Your breathing changes. Your confidence shifts. Doubt loses volume. This is not psychology theory, it is biological response. The body follows movement. The mind follows the body. Waiting to feel ready keeps you trapped in analysis. Acting immediately breaks the cycle and forces alignment. Most people overestimate the power of preparation and underestimate the power of execution. They plan, research, and rehearse, thinking clarity will come first. But clarity is a reward for action, not a prerequisite. You learn by doing. You refine by moving. Progress is messy, but stagnation is fatal. Action accepts imperfection in exchange for progress. Motivation demands perfection before it agrees to participate. Small actions create big shifts. You don't need to do everything. You just need to do something. One email sent, one page written, one workout started. These actions seem insignificant, but they compound psychologically. Each completed action builds self-trust. Each follow-through reduces resistance. Over time, action becomes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who executes. Motivation is a response, not a requirement. When you act consistently, motivation shows up to support the behavior you've already started. This is why disciplined people appear motivated all the time. They are not driven by emotion, they are driven by systems. Systems create consistency. Consistency creates results. Results create motivation. The order matters. Action also shortens the distance between intention and outcome. The longer you wait, the more fear grows. Fear thrives in imagination, not in execution. Once you start, fear loses its leverage because reality replaces assumption. You may still feel discomfort, but discomfort no longer controls you. Movement puts you back in charge. The habit of action builds resilience. When action becomes your default response, setbacks lose their power. You stop personalizing delays and start adjusting strategy. You don't ask, why is this happening to me? You ask, what's the next move? That mindset shift alone separates high performers from spectators. In the end, success is not built by people who feel motivated every day. It is built by people who move even when motivation is absent. Action trains the mind to follow through. It builds confidence through evidence. It creates momentum that carries you forward when emotion cannot. If you want to change your life, don't wait to feel ready. Act first. Motivation will catch up. Your environment is quietly shaping you, whether you are aware of it or not. It doesn't ask for permission, and it doesn't wait for motivation. It works automatically. That is why environment is not just influential, it is a multiplier. It either amplifies your discipline or magnifies your weakness. Most people try to change their lives by relying on willpower alone, but willpower is limited. Environment is constant. When your environment supports your growth, progress accelerates. When it works against you, growth becomes a daily battle. You will naturally rise or fall to the standards of what surrounds you. If distraction is normal in your environment, focus becomes difficult. If mediocrity is accepted, excellence feels uncomfortable. If growth is rare, ambition feels lonely. This is not a character flaw, it is conditioning. The brain adapts to what it repeatedly experiences. Over time, the environment trains you on what to expect, what to tolerate, and what to pursue. Environment includes more than physical space. It includes the people you interact with, the conversations you entertain, the expectations placed on you, and the behaviors that are rewarded or ignored. These elements communicate constantly, even when nothing is said. When you spend time around people who complain, rationalize, and settle, those behaviors become familiar. Familiarity lowers resistance. And what you don't resist, you eventually accept a growth-o. Oriented environment reduces friction. Instead of forcing yourself to act, action becomes the default. You don't have to fight as hard to stay consistent because consistency is reinforced around you. This is why people change faster when they change rooms. New standards create new behavior without constant effort. The environment does the heavy lifting. Your environment also shapes your identity. When you are surrounded by people who expect excellence, you begin to see excellence as part of who you are. When accountability is normal, discipline becomes natural. When progress is celebrated, effort feels worthwhile. This doesn't mean you become dependent on others. It means Alignment replaces resistance. Growth stops feeling like self-denial and starts feeling like self-respect. One of the fastest ways to level up is to design your environment intentionally. Remove what distracts you. Limit access to what drains you. Increase exposure to what challenges you. This is not about cutting people off harshly. It is about setting boundaries strategically. Proximity is powerful. Who and what you are close to will influence what you become. High performers don't rely on motivation. They rely on environment. They set up their lives so that the right actions are easier and the wrong actions are harder. This is not discipline by force, it is discipline by design. When the environment is aligned, consistency requires less effort and produces greater results. Your environment can either multiply excuses or multiply execution. It can reinforce who you've been or accelerate who you're becoming. The choice is rarely dramatic, but it is always decisive. Small environmental shifts create massive long-term impact because they affect you every single day. If you want to grow faster, don't just work harder, work smarter by upgrading your environment. Change what you see, what you hear, and who you engage with. When your environment changes, your behavior follows. And when behavior follows consistently, results multiply. Everything you've heard comes down to one truth. Your future is not created by chance, it is created by choice. Your 2026 will not magically improve because the calendar changes. It will improve only if you change what you do daily. Decisions over circumstances, identity over intention, discipline over comfort, inputs over excuses, action over emotion, and environment over willpower. These are not ideas to admire. They are principles to live by. You don't need years to transform your life. You need a focused season of alignment. 30 days of deciding instead of drifting. 30 days of acting instead of waiting. 30 days of feeding your mind instead of distracting it. 30 days of doing the hard things even when no one is watching. That short window has the power to permanently shift how you see yourself. And once that happens, your results will follow automatically. Stop waiting for motivation. Stop negotiating with circumstances. Stop hoping your environment will change on its own. Take control. Design the next 30 days with intention because those days are designing the next version of you. When discipline becomes self-respect, when action becomes your default, and when your environment supports your growth, progress stops being a struggle and starts becoming inevitable. By the time 2026 arrives, you shouldn't be hoping for a breakthrough. You should be living in one, not because life got easier, but because you got stronger, clearer, and more disciplined. The next chapter of your life doesn't begin next year. It begins the moment you decide to start these 30 days. And if you commit fully, your future will not just be different, it will be unrecognizable.